I also want to see it, but I like looked, and I think.
Okay.
So I don't know. Anyway, so we had this chart, and there were 4 groups, and I'm gonna mess up the original names, but I'm gonna give you the idea.
Sure.
So you had to have a few people who you were just generally pursuing, who are not involved in church. That were the pursuit. That was the first one. Who you're just generally pursuing, and sometimes that can just look like staying a few minutes after class and being like, "What's up?" Yeah. And so that was like they're completely out of the church bubble.
That's like your atheist friend that you see across the classroom. They're like, this person needs Jesus, and I'm gonna like strike up a friendship with them to share Jesus with them.
Yeah, so that's the pursuit of the final step, but you have to have people in each category at all times.
Okay.
But then you're moving them through the categories.
Right.
So you have your secular acquaintance, that you're just like, the what?
No, I didn't say that.
And you're just like, what's up? Like, isn't this class a load of crap? Like,
yeah, right.
Just trying to like relate to them.
Like someone you are being a normal human being with, is what you're saying?
Yes, but there's like a deep underlying, this
agenda.
Is my plan.
Yeah.
And I had to type in their names in the spreadsheet every week.
What are you people doing?
And say what I did to connect with them. Okay. Next level was like a chill friendship level. So it was like, now it's not just when you see them, you invite them to coffee. You don't bring up Jesus yet. You can bring it up in your own life in a sense that it means a lot to you, but don't like push it on them.
Yeah.
And so you had to have a few people that you were actually like hanging out with and trying to like get it to happen. Okay. So you were like actually getting the friendship, and you were like you're supposed to show interest in what they were interested in, because then you get some buy-in. And these aren't like bad things, but I think it's weird when it's like convoluted.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, it's good to show interest in what other people are
I'm
doing.
waiting for you to share the weird part about this. I have this list in my house. No.
Stop. And your kids write the names of their friends in each category.
So it's pursuit, and then what's the second one? Sorry.
I don't remember the word.
But it's like kind of casual connection.
I love it. Casual connection.
Sure.
But the connection is like one-on-one. Like,
something outside of the... Yeah.
Also, every time we hung out with someone, we called it a one-on-one.
Yeah. I feel that from like Christian college world.
Right. But I also just like, even like my friends would be like, do you want to have a one-on-one? And I'm like, I just want to hang out with you.
Yeah. That was like growing... And my school did not have... Like, we never had the spreadsheet. But like, that was very like Christian bubble language. It was like people... If you were hanging out with someone that like... As you say, it like brings back a lot of memories from my college experience.
It's a
like,
little
hey,
bit.
Do you want to like get a one-on-one? Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to get a one-on-one? Okay. And then the next level is you invite them into the community. So after you've like found the friendship moment and you're like, okay, we're like hanging out. Also, you have to do 2 of each of these every week. And that is 8 people.
Right.
Which is just a lot.
And this is like mandated to you by like the
because
campus
I was on the leadership team.
Yeah, okay.
So everyone on the leadership team had to do this. And so you have to have 2 people who you like have met with this week that maybe you wouldn't normally, and it's not the most comfortable, but it's important. Again, that's not a bad thing to say without context. Okay, the third one, bring them into community. Invite them to an RUF event. That's why we had like non-churchy events. And so it was like, come play glow in the dark capture the flag with us because we're hip and cool.
Yeah.
And then we like got them in, right? And then they were like hooked.
Right.
And then the 4th step was sharing the gospel with them step by step.
Yeah.
But like teaching them all the basics. Like you would go through the book of Matthew with them. There was like a whole curriculum.
Okay.
You would go through the book of Matthew and you'd be like, this is the gospel step by step. At the end, they like have full understanding of the gospel, basically.
Certainly they do.
Full understanding. It was called Christianity Explored.
Sure.
So first of all, what's your take on just the journey?
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts. Not snarky response first, I would say.
Okay.
And maybe I'll just stay fully in not snarky mode. But it makes sense in the sense of like, Christianity is a proselytizing religion, right? So like I've talked to our friend Rabbi Josh, who's been on the pod, been to the well. One of the things that we've often talked about, major difference between Judaism and Christianity, is like Judaism is a non-proselytizing religion. So Christianity is, which that means like sharing with other people, like inviting them, right? And so, or trying to convert them, I guess is maybe a better way to say it. But so it makes sense in that kind of way, in the sense of, like, you guys are a campus ministry. Your leader, who is the paid staff person, loses the job if there's no one in his ministry.
For sure.
So it's self-generative. Also, if you believe Jesus is coming back and you believe your way is the only way, why would you not? So there's a lot of ways that you could be like, this makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Also, as like, I'll say, as someone who started a church, like, I'm not someone who's unaware of the reality that, like, I keep spreadsheets of people that are like, are they involved in the church or not, right? And like, how are we, like, who is here, who are my friends, who could I invite? But I wasn't like, hey, here are my people that, like, are my hardcore non-religious friends that I can invite them to laser tag to one day come to my church. Yeah. But like, I have had my versions of those things. But from what I hear you saying, it's less of like a database and more of like it's way more focused on the first step. Like, all the other things are mechanisms to move the pursuit people into being Christians, right?
Yes.
And so,
yes.
Which is where I would say it was somewhat different. Like, this is just like, for me, it was like, I want to get to know who's in our church so I can get to know them better. This is like very centric on like who isn't a part of our group yet, and we want to get them in. Again, nothing really inherently wrong with that. So I want you to chat a little bit more about it, but I can see where it would get like weird in the sense that, like, then no one is ever really a friend. Like, one of my mentors growing up, who was one of my youth leaders, youth pastor, started the church, now works outside of ministry. But one of the things we had talked about earlier is like, you can't like have friendships that are like based in an agenda. Like, either you're their friend or you're not their friend. Mm-hmm. And that's where it becomes like an issue. It's like, sure, you care about their eternal salvation, but I think on a humanistic level, you have to like care about the person before you can care about all the other things, even if that is the most eternally important thing that you believe in. Like, if you don't like genuinely care about them now, and I actually said this in our sermon, like, this Sunday I talked about heaven and hell, and it's like Jesus spends over 70% of his time talking about life here and now, and not about life that's not yet here. And so like, we have to care about here and now, and that's what I like think is a little bit missed here. Is it's like, it's so focused on the what if after we die, and it like just moves people like cattle kind of through this like farm of becoming Christians. And why things like, not to like shame things, because my wife she grew up in like Young Life, loved it, but things like Young Life use this model, and it's like problematic and doesn't have high retention rates, because even though you're walking people through the gospel,
where's the gospel?
And like you said, like at the end of it, they fully, like, they don't,
right,
because it's like a machine to push people through. And that's why you watch people, probably a decent percentage of our podcast, of people that were on someone's list somewhere, and then they never really got anything that stuck, because it wasn't based in a relationship or based in like sound theology. It was just based in like moving people through the steps in a process.
Well, I was a volunteer for K-Life throughout high school, which is similar, or throughout college, which is similar. And we also had a spreadsheet for that, about like when we texted them and like when we met with them and like where we think they're at spiritually, and like
the spreadsheets you're telling me that seem like way more like intense.
I've been developing the Swanson Pyramid of Greatness for years.
Here's the thing, they are definitely my sensitive spot, because I felt like it was it was supposed to be this like accountability for leaders to make sure that you were doing your job, and so like that we had data to show the like people who give, because I also understand that like fundraising is big in both K-Life and RUF. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so I understand that data is a real thing, but I just have always really struggled with data. I struggle with it as a teacher when people ask me for data, because I'm just like, I don't want to be so data driven that I become not people oriented. Yeah. And so I've always pushed back on that and been like very anti spreadsheet, and been like, I forgot about it when I didn't, because I just like couldn't do it. Like, it would breed like shame.
So you never
me.
Really liked it, even when you were like full bore into that.
When the RUF spreadsheet came out, I called my pastor and I said, all this is going to do is create more shame.
Yeah.
And he said, well, some people don't do their job on the leadership team, so we need accountability. He was like, I get that you already do a lot, but also we're going a different direction than I thought, and that's okay. Sure. Also, that we are not paid to do that. And that really gets me. And maybe this is very sassy of me to say, but like, I would get very, very frustrated when I'm being like accountability held and being like, did you do 3 one-on-ones this week? And it's like, I'm a full-time student.
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid to do this. When we had community groups in RUF, there were 3 leaders, and it was the 2 staff members and me, which I was so honored, right? But I was also just like, this is a staff job and I'm getting nothing, which is, I'm not trying to say pay everybody, but what I'm saying is like, I think it's a very weird line to hold volunteers to this weird level of accountability.
Yeah, I hear that definitely. I would say like something that pops into my mind that seems like a core or a connection is like, I thought like when I went to Christian college, so you went to Mizzou, obviously not a Christian college. I went to a small liberal arts Christian school, and like we had to go to chapel twice a week.
Yep.
And one of the things that like I would often say to like anyone in spiritual life and to our president, I was like, you can't mandate someone's spirituality. Like, and so it's like telling me I have to go 2 times a week is making me resent it. Where if like I had the opportunity, maybe I would go. And in the same sense, it's like maybe you want to talk to your friends about life and faith, and you want to move them through organically whatever you think that pipeline looks like. But I think the moment it becomes like mandated with punitive actions taken if you're not following it, then it becomes something altogether different. And so like connecting to my own story, like that's where I was like, mandatory chapel, I would say that's like the least Christian thing you can do. Because you can't force someone to be a part of this. And it sounds similar to this. It's like you can't force people like you who were a part of the collective, very involved in your faith, to be evangelists for something, even if they care about it. Because if you're going to get into the spiritual gifts thing too, not everyone's an evangelist. Not everyone's like out there to like do that kind of stuff. And so I always get a little, the spreadsheet doesn't give me much attention as I think it probably gives you.
Yeah.
But what gives me attention is forcing people to do something for the sake of the organization that maybe isn't actually helping them grow in their faith at all.
Take it or leave it.
And I would say retrospectively looking back, didn't really help you grow in your faith at all.
Right.
And I don't know if it helped any of the people that were on your list. Like, where are they now? Do you know anything about these people?
Honestly, one of them is a full-blown Christian now. And I just got to say, that was all me. Nothing to do with the Holy Spirit. Nothing to do with anyone else. That was Emily. I'm kidding.
That'll go on TikTok and get roasted on YouTube.
Right. But there was also a lot of people that were clearly frustrated because I was just like, hey, do you want to get coffee? And they were like, no. Like,
yeah,
I don't know you.
Like, did people know, like, about... So, pull out.
Great question.
RUF, what was your reputation on campus at Mizzou?
I mean, Mizzou's so big.
That's what she said.
But I was very spiritual. Like, one of my favorites. This is terrible looking back, but in the moment I was like, I'm, on fire for God. But like, I was in English class and there was this girl sitting next to me and I was like, she could be one of my pursuits this week. Because also we had to go to our leadership group every Monday night and we had to say out loud to everyone what we did this week. Like, so there was, to me, there's like some shame in that, but I'm also very like, I easily lean towards shame, but I always felt like if I didn't do it, then I had to come be like, I failed this week. Like I failed the leadership team. Anyway, but her name, I think was like Beth. And I pulled out
Hope you listen, Beth.
If she listens, I'm so sorry. Honestly. But I whipped out my ESV study Bible like a baddie, and it was like torn up and like, annotated, like, and she was like, wow, you must really love that book. And I looked at her and I go, it's my Bible. She never talked to me again.
Nothing worth anything, just a case of Bibles.
I'll show you how worthwhile a Bible is.
Which is honestly fair, because I was kind of like a lot about it. I was like, you know what? She didn't need to. She was like, because here's the thing, especially at a place like Mizzou, I don't want to say especially, I do think sometimes when you just say like, I'm a Christian, I think a lot of people who are not in the church, like they might see that as like, that's an unsafe person.
Yeah.
And I
that's kind of what I'm asking is like, yeah. So
was
like,
I an unsafe person?
Well, did people view, because like in a big school, in a non-Christian school, Christians can be viewed as that, unsafe. And then if like there's an organizational, like I've been a part of different, when I worked at SLU or did ministry at SLU, like every campus ministry had its reputation on campus of like, these are the people that are like aggressively doing this. These are the people that are inclusive to this group. These are the people that X, Y, or Z thing. So every group has so you've shared a little bit of like what you thought maybe your reputation was,
right?
But it how was RUF seen? Yeah, were people like, oh, these people are just here to like, did they know that they were pursuits, or did they just like, or were they not privy to that whole behind the scenes stuff?
They were not privy. However, I think people could probably feel my urgency, like specifically me. Like I was like, I have to find 8 people every week to like do all these things, and that was very stressful to me.
It's like a few weeks into the semester, everyone's like, oh, Emily's making rounds to me this time.
I'm just like I just have to find people to pursue and be like, hey, I'm Emily, you know, like that part really stressed me out, and so I'm sure they were probably like. And also, sometimes my pastor would assign one-on-ones to me. So if like he met a random student on campus,
like Emily would be a great person for you to hang out with.
And so I would like run from class to, you know, get coffee with this person.
You run faster than Forrest Gump any day.
And you know all that. I remember I had coffee with this one girl, and she was like, "I just really like to like compartmentalize my faith," and I was like, "This girl does not get it."
So something that's interesting to me, I don't know.
We're going a different direction, but I want to keep going wherever we are.
Well, so I was gonna say, I don't know that you want to go here or not, and so you can take this as far as you want. But I think what's interesting when I look at this is, and I think this is biblical, that you can only be pursuing like one thing, right? And in this, you're pursuing like people, and people like Jesus and your faith is not the pursuit of your heart in that process, right? Like people populating the organization are in name what you're pursuing. Like there's no name of like pursuing Christ. There's no name of pursuing depth in your relationship with God, like any of that. It's like about pursuing other people to join the club.
Well, that was another 4-step thing. So there was grow, eat, serve, go. So there was like grow in knowledge of God's word.
Yeah.
Eat together. So that was like the community part. Serve. And then go like find non-Christians and like be a part of their community.
So funny, just as like I'm like this guy too. So it's just funny how not creative church people are. It's like I branded that in my own way. Like it's just so fun. We're just like all the same.
So like my pastor would have said like, well, Emily like pursuing Christ and pursuing, but we would have said biblical knowledge is like grow. And then what you did is we got an award after every semester for one of the 4.
Okay.
So I actually got the Go Award because I always brought a new bitch to RUF, okay?
I'm out this bitch!
Every single time. I was like, this is my friend Tammy, who I barely met, but I was like, please come. I was so annoying. And it was the worst. And so, and they were like, Emily's a bringer. I was like, I am a bringer. And so I just brought everybody. They never came back. They were just like, this is like
your
not my vibe.
Your retention rate was pretty low, but you were,
my retention
got a lot of at bats.
Pretty low. But because they were just like, what in the world? But because I kind of catfished them with it a little bit. You know, like I was like, there's like cornhole. But then we also like sang and had a sermon.
Yeah.
But in general, like, I actually don't even think my pursuit was actually people or actually spreading the gospel because I was a hardcore Calvinist. I was like, literally, I don't have control over this.
Sure.
Honestly, my goal was like to make my pastor proud of me.
Yeah.
TBH. Because I loved getting the texts that were like, you're such a great bringer. Like, oh my God, God is working through you. And I'm like, yeah, he is.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very astute of you to like realize that that's like what you were pursuing. But I also like think that you're probably not the only one in that, right? And it's not inherently bad. Like, I mean, and maybe it is inherently bad, but I'll think about this for a second as I verbally process. But like, your pastor cares a lot about his life and his faith and the theology he's crafted around that. And he's brought up other people around him that are a part of that. And so like for him, like he's probably really proud to like see people like, because it's not like you're bringing people to RUF, you're bringing people to Christ is how but I think for you retrospectively looking back, like, I don't know that, and it sounds like you said this, like you didn't really draw that much closer to Jesus in this process. And you're not quite certain that the people that you brought to RUF drew that. Now, if you believe in like you're planting seeds everywhere, it's like those will grow at their own time and that's great. But it's like, how many people in this process really like got that much closer to Jesus, which is an interesting thing to think about.
And I was so frantic and miserable because I was just like, it was this balance
which
of
is
like,
a hallmark of like really defined Presbyterian or Reformed faith.
But like the thing is at the other point though, I was the only girl that was like doing all this, and so I was like, I'm such a baddie. Like I'm a girl in the like ministry group, you know, like I'm nailing it.
Yeah.
And so and honestly, I'm gonna say this. I think that was used against me in the long run because I did so much, and I just like I was asked to do things like way out of my boundaries, and like I was asked to change my major for RUF.
What?
And because when I did my student teaching, I wouldn't be able to like serve. I can't believe I'm sharing that.
That's wild.
And was asked to move. I like had free housing, but they were like, we need you to move so that you can like have people over. So I like found a place and like paid rent, which is fine.
Yeah. Nothing like inherently like sinister about that stuff, but it is interesting.
I think that's a lot to ask a volunteer.
It's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask, yeah. Trying to give the benefit of the doubt here.
I think it's a lot to ask a volunteer. To change my major?
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever ask anyone that. That's pretty wild. Especially if it's like in the context of the way it's being explained. If it's change it just because it might get in the way, like your career might get in the way of like this campus ministry that you won't be connected to for the rest, like the majority of your life.
They'd be like, you might not be able to like lead a Bible study. And I was like, well, I've never been allowed to lead a Bible study. And so like, I love that. And so he was like, you can change your major or you can.
That's wild. But you didn't change your major.
I didn't. And you know what? Shout out to my mom for that because I called her and I was like, I'm changing my major. And she was like,
Girl, no.
Girl, no. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so mad. But at the end, like, I'm very thankful to her for that because she like talked me off a ledge. But I was just so invested in the mission that I was just like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Good looking out, Mom.
I know. I thank you. I don't think I've ever thanked her in person for that, but
yeah.
What a G. All that to say, I think like that is pretty intense. And also though, this is what I wanted to get to. And I know that we're kind of going long on time, so I want to eventually wrap it up.
It's the first time back in the basement in a long time.
And I don't really know what the theme of this episode is, but I think it's interesting.
I'm having a fun time talking about it.
Okay. I just like can't think of a title, but that's your job.
That is my job. And one of the hardest jobs.
But what I was gonna say is guitar head pastor. But like I also think that ultimately, and I want to hear a little more about what you feel about like, I think this ends up being an episode about like how to treat volunteers low-key, because I think that this is all my experience of like being a volunteer, being a hardcore volunteer. And all that to say, when I had a very bad summer one summer, came back to college and was like super depressed. Like I ended up having to like move back home for a little bit, and thankfully it was during COVID, and so I was able to do that.
Yeah.
Which I'm just like I was able to do all online classes and very thankful for that opportunity. But I was at school for like a month, and I was like everyone was like, Emily, your like eyes are glazed over, like you are like not okay. And I was not okay. And my pastor texted me and said, how many one-on-ones have you done this week?
God, what a dick.
And that hurt so much.
Yeah.
Because like I was like, I just told him, I was like, none. Like I have no energy. Like I'm trying to like not cry all the time and try to like be okay. Like the answer is none, and I just don't know the like space that I have for that. And I will say like then after that he was like, yeah, you like seem pretty like tired and out of it. And I kind of was like, if you saw that, then like why did you ask me that? And then we ended up like going on a walk, and you know he was like encouraging. Then we had a one-on-one, and we went on a walk, and I just sobbed on this walking trail, and people like, is she okay? And I'm like, no. But one thing about me, I have no problem crying in public.
Love it.
But like that really hurt my feelings to be like in a place where I needed pastoring.
Yeah.
Like I needed that care, and instead like I was asked like, how am I gonna do
more work.
More work that is not my job, and volunteering is a real thing, and I think it's important, but like there also is a point where it's like I don't have to say yes to you, and I don't have to do this accountability thing because like what am I being too sassy about being a volunteer?
No, so I feel that tension like a ton. And so I would actually, like, from my perspective as a person asking people to volunteer.
Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts.
I think I err on the side of like, I don't hold people super accountable, which I think does actually have some to the other extreme, like hyper.
Yeah.
It can have some negative, not hyper, but they have some negative impacts. So like and maybe not hold people accountable, but like I really am cognizant or try to be. I'm sure there's someone that's like, Danny, you're definitely not that and you've overextended me. But I try not to ask people to do, like, I'd rather do it myself if it's not like something people are hyper passionate about.
Yeah.
Or it's not like their gifts or something, right? So great example, like I setting up the sanctuary at the well. Like I'm just going to fall on this grenade. Like, I don't need to ask someone to get there 2 hours early, an hour early to like move chairs and be in this hot room. Like kids ministry, like I haven't done a huge push to like get people in there because a lot of people are like, I'm not that passionate about that. So like I let people that are passionate come to me and then I give them the opportunity. And I think there's some maybe negative things in that. Like there's not probably a huge, you could make this argument and maybe I should make this argument. There's not a huge culture of like volunteerism and serving at the well, probably because of that, because you may be like, well, Danny does a lot of stuff, but I try to protect that because I've been in situations where I've been the volunteer that's overworked, or when I took over one of the campuses of a church I worked at, all of my volunteers quit on me, not because of anything the pastor before did, but they all carried the mission and the vision really hard. Worked every Sunday for 3 years and like, this is just exhausting. And I was like, I don't want anyone to feel like that. And so it's probably somewhat of an overcorrection. But I do think like from your perspective, or for anyone that's like at a church, like I think I think you and everyone in your seat should ask, like, is this something I'm passionate about? Is it something I'm gifted to do? And do I simply just want to wake up and do this?
Cock-a-doodle-doo.
It's like if it's every day, if it's once a week, if it's 1 hour, 3 hours, like that's not really relevant as much like, do I want to do whatever I'm like the time frame I'm committing to? Great example. You preached. You were like, hey, I don't want to preach. And you were on the schedule. I could have been like, well, you're on the schedule and I'm taking this Sunday off. And like, that wouldn't have been life-giving to you, me, or the church.
I would have been pretty hurt by that, even though I would have understood.
Yeah. And like, I think you're gifted at preaching. I think you have the skills for that. I think that it's part of like your passion and all of that. I think you have all of the gifts and graces to do that. And now 6-7 months later, you're doing it again.
Absolutely.
And that's awesome. But like, how would that have been different if from my perspective, it was like, my job is to be like, you committed to this and you're doing this. And so just white knuckle it and get through it. Like you probably wouldn't. This podcast probably wouldn't still be happening. Our friendship might not be happening.
It's a really good point.
And I don't know that you'd ever preach again. And so, and for something that I think you're like objectively like gifted at, like I think it'd be like a waste to think of the short term versus the long term for people. And that's, for me as a pastor, like my job isn't just preaching or pastoral care. I think it's helping people in their time realize their gifts and their passions to be put to work for something that's bigger than themselves, but not like forcing them into that in my time. Like it's about their timeline in that. So
yeah, I mean, I think you're right on the money. And I think even like that list you said of like, are they gifted in it? Do they want to do it? And are they passionate about it? Like sometimes all those answers are yes. And it is actually still not the right choice to say yes at the moment. If you just think like, I think like a fourth question is like, do I legitimately have this availability?
Yeah. So that's another, I didn't even mention that, but there's people that do check the 3 I said, and they just don't have any time. And then they say they're going to do it and then they never do it. Or
that's me right there.
Or they begrudgingly do it and then they stop doing it.
And then they
resent me, or they resent the church, or they resent God. And it's like, it never works out if you don't have the margin. Now, there's a great question in there. Do I need to create more margin? Are there other things that are gunking that up or whatever? Like, that's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah.
But the question has to be asked before you just start throwing yourself into it and then realizing in real time you didn't have the margin.
Yeah, but creating more margin is weird because that was a big thing talked about in both RUF and K-Life. And like, I remember I had a job during Christmas time. I worked as a Christmas elf and like all this. And that was going to make my commitment to K-Life really difficult.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, then you like need to quit your job. And I was like, so true. And so I like called my boss. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I can't be an elf. And she was like, it's fine. But like, is that really what you want? I'm like, no, it's not what I want, but that's what they told me to do. Like, I also think the way that ministries create margin for you and prioritize things for you.
Yeah.
I've had a pretty bad experience with that.
The assumption when that conversation happens in the church is that you're creating margin for the church to fill that space up. And when I'm saying create margin, it should just be in life in general. Like, I don't think
like chill.
And to shout out to our boy Dustin behind the mic in his cozy recliner, his lazy boy. Great, like, cognizant way to create margin with his new phone situation, right? Like,
absolutely
got like a new dumb phone that he can't do his email and his stuff on, like, limits that. That's like a margin creating thing.
Love
that
it.
will then create space across the board. And I think, like, we often, whether it's in work or faith or whatever, we compartmentalize where that margin is, and it should be like a holistic conversation.
Yeah.
That I don't think, to your point, churches probably think in the holistic way because they just think of their own microcosm, and then individuals I don't often think of the totality of.
Yeah, I'm with you. And even like my boyfriend the other day, I had like a evening off, and he was like, please do not create tasks for yourself. And I was like, oh, I totally do that. Like, there's always someone I could be hanging out with, or like,
yeah,
like there's always things that you could be doing, but like that, I think what I've noticed is I actually do have margin. I just fill my margin up.
Yeah, I'm similar. Yeah.
And I'm just like, then you're just gonna hate everybody. Okay. Is there a takeaway from this little, like,
I don't know
talk?
I mean, yes, I think there is a takeaway in there somewhere, but I think
you find it.
Like, you find it. I think for me,
we can't do everything for you. Sorry.
I think you and I have different takeaways, right? For me, like, a couple things hit me, and these aren't even the major things that you even talked about, but I'm like, as a pastor who's not like hyper gifted in pastoral care, like, I just started going through the laundry list of people that were in your shoes that probably need more pastoral care than just like I'm currently giving them. And so it was a reminder for me of like, my job as a pastor isn't always the things that I'm the most like gifted in, and like there's a whole idea of what it means to be a pastor. And I think for you, in the same way, it's like there's a lot more of being involved in your life and faith than just like recruiting people to join the club.
Yeah.
And I think there's just, from the seat I sit in, there's so much more complexity than we give life and faith, church, any of that credit for. And it's a pretty general takeaway, but for me, like, I just think this is everything that we've gone into in the 5 episodes we've done always continue to point to like the idea that it's just more complex than I think we initially give it credit for.
And I think, like, for me, the takeaways that I'm thinking about right now is like, one, I wish, and we were all doing our best, like, with we could, but like, I wish that I was able to see in the moment, like, I'm a volunteer, or like, I'm like, this isn't my job, this isn't my career, and like, to be able to put some boundaries on that, because I really didn't in college. Like, it was my whole identity.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, like, I have some really good friends now who were definitely in my like pursuit people.
Yeah.
And so, and like, we're really good friends, and not all of them are Christians. And I think that I love those friendships, and I wish that those friendships wouldn't have started with like the urgency of, and like the methodicalness of me recruiting them, but also that friendships can still bloom even in really creepy ways like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Do you want to do an email corner or skip it?
I'd say we chatted it up today. So
we did.
Let's maybe start our next one. We'll do a few more emails in the next one.
I dig it.
And make up for lost time.
But let's do some recommendations.
Yeah.
You go first.
Nope, please you.
Okay. Crap. No, I definitely have like, I just need a second. Oh, okay. I actually have one. I thought about this for a while. I like knew that I was ready, but then I forgot them. I'm gonna shout out another podcast for this. Is that okay?
Yes.
I've been loving the podcast Bingetopia.
Okay.
It's very good. It's two girls like about my age, one's a little older, one's a little younger. Just like educating you on different things. Like, they do a lot of research, and they're very fun. But one thing specifically is that I really enjoyed is they did one about on Christmas and one on Easter, and one of the host is Jewish, and one of the hosts kind of was like raised Christian. Okay. And they flip-flopped, and like the Christian host explained Hanukkah and the Jewish host explained Christmas. And I really enjoyed seeing, like, hearing the Christmas story and the Easter story with fresh eyes from someone who, like, isn't a Christian and isn't trying to be a Christian. Like, there was this really beautiful moment where Julia, who's the Jewish host, she was like, I didn't realize that Jesus being born in a manger was this statement that, like, he is, like, lowly and one of us. And, like, and it was just, like, really beautiful. And I just dug it. And I love their podcast anyway, but those episodes specifically, like, religiously, I found very powerful.
I love that. It's called what? Say it one more time.
Binge-topia.
Binge-topia. I like
Binge.
Oh, binge.
It's like bitch, but an N instead of a T.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
I love that. So my recommendation, by the time this episode comes out, you will have just preached 2 days early. And I think I recommend everyone listen to your sermon. I think it's going to be a banger. I think it's wonderful that you're going to be back preaching. And I'm just very excited for you, excited to hear it and learn from you. And I couldn't recommend more to either come out to the well, which you won't have a chance to by the time this comes out.
I'll preach again.
Or go back
well.
and, yeah, you'll preach again. Or go back and listen to it. I'm sure it's going to be, you're talking about the gentleness of God.
Yeah, and I'm really pumped about it.
Yeah,
and
I would recommend it.
I actually was thinking about this while we were talking. I did invite friends to that who are going to come.
Good.
Who are, like, looking for a church, which is, like, great. But I realized, like, what we tried to make methodical, like, people just do. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a bringer.
I've said this, though. If you like the restaurant or the movie, you naturally invite people
Wait,
to
but we need to go back to this, though, because do you see a little bit more why when you said that, I got a little stressed?
Yeah, I can now see where you but I still strongly believe that if you care about something, you invite people to it of any type, or you share with people. But I get, because I even was thinking about this, like, there are people, this was when I wanted to start a church like 10 years ago. I had essentially that same list, but I came out of essentially, I would say, a similar background to what you, or not the same, but similar kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was like, I put these people in my list of, like, these are my non-Christian friends that I hope in 10 years will, like, be at the church. And, like, none of them are, because I wasn't good friends to them.
Right.
And so yes, I very much validate and hear, and it makes a lot more sense, because when you hear that, you hear like you get pulled back into what you once did and all the feelings that came with that.
Mm-hmm. But for sure, like, but like this, like, I did invite friends to church, and I wasn't trying to be weird about it. I was just like, I'm preaching, and it'd be fun if you came.
Yeah.
And that's much chiller.
It's way more chill.
And that was genuine, and not, I don't have to put their name in a spreadsheet. It's all about the spreadsheets for me.
I'm getting that now. You're not a numbers person.
I'm not a data person. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
Not that you can't be both, but sometimes I feel like you can't be both. This is because I see things very black and white a lot.
Yeah.
And so I see numbers are people.
Yeah.
Random way to end the pod. Okay.
Yeah. It's like we started a whole nother episode trying to end an episode.
But anyway, thanks for talking about this. This did not go the direction I thought, but I think the conversation's important, and I think I know a lot of our listeners have really struggled even with, like, deconstruction, but also a lot of our listeners have struggled with deconstruction.
Who would have thought?
But also that they are, like, still volunteering or felt very burnt out by volunteering. And so I think this topic is not really where I meant to go, but I do think it's really important.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, so
shout out Webster Gross Field Hockey for supporting this episode.
Is that your wife's shirt? Not because it's pink. That's actually exactly why I'm asking it.
No, it's my shirt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you play field hockey?
Nope, just got it from the coach. It was very nice of him.
Sick, yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening, guys.
And embrace the journey.
Did you snap?
Yeah.
No.
I always snap.
Good.